Yo, what's up? My name is Greg Santos. I am the author of The Real Nigga Bible for All Races. Available for purchase on Barnes& and Noble. I'll put the link in the description. But I wanted to talk about when I first met Chris Voss. I only met Chris Voss one time, and I was very fortunately invited to a mastermind called War Room, which is no longer in existence. It used to be, it's, Andrew Tate has his own version of War Room, but this War Room was ran by a guy named Roland Frazier, and he had three partners: Ryan Dice, Perry Belcher, and Richard Lindner. And Roland had invited me to this mastermind, and it's $30,000 a year to be a member, and you had to have a six-figure business in order, no, not six-figure, seven-figure business in order to qualify. And I remember the first day, Ryan Dice, he hits the stage and he walks us through this exercise. And I'm sitting right in the front of this room, this big ballroom that has about 300 people in it. And at a certain point, I start to scan the room. I look behind and see if I recognize anybody. And out in the distance, I see Chris Voss. And I'm like, oh my God, bro, like, that's Chris Voss. Like, oh my God, that's crazy. What the fuck? Like, he's here. So Ryan Dice excuses us for a break for 15 minutes and he walks off stage. So there's commotion. People get up. People are talking amongst each other at their tables. And I immediately look over at Chris Voss's table and he doesn't engage with the other two people who are at his table. And he stands up out of his seat with his hands in his pockets and he just looks out into the distance in deep thought. So I walk right over to him and I say, "Hey, Chris." And not he wasn't startled, He just gently brought his attention to me. I said, "Hey, I'm a big fan of Never Split the Difference." No reaction. And I said, "I hear you're coming out with another book. I happen to have a podcast with young entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs. I would love to interview you to help you promote your book to a younger audience when it's coming out." And Chris goes, "How did you know I'm writing another book?" And a couple weeks before that, there was someone I really admire named Joe Polish, who runs a mastermind called Genius Network. And Joe had interviewed Chris and said that Chris is writing another book. And I said, "Well, I saw you on that live call with Joe." And he said, "Oh, so you're a genius," meaning I'm in Genius Network. And always admired Joe because I loved his book, Life Gives to the Giver. It's a free book on like joesfreebook.com. And I read it like six, seven, I don't know, 8 times, something like that. It's such a great book. And I said, "No, I'm not a genius, but I really respect Joe Polish and I hope to be a member of Genius Network someday." And he goes, "Okay, well, young entrepreneurs, hmm? Like what age is like young entrepreneurs?" And I was like 18 to like 30. And he goes, "Okay." And he said that around 18 to 25 in our adult life is when our brains are the most neuroplastic, right? After that, our brains start to get rigid. And he said at the time he was listening to music that he was listening to when he was in his early 20s to bring his brain back to that neuroplasticity. It was very fascinating. And when we spoke, it was like as if it was just me and him in this world, and there was just this bubble. And slowly but surely, people started to recognize him. So there was a crowd that began to form. But despite this crowd that was beginning to form, Chris was still locked in with me. And it wasn't until somebody else had interrupted and paid their respects is when Chris began to address the group. And he addressed the group, and then at a certain point, Ryan Dice announces that we're gonna restart again, and I asked him how I can help him out, and he said that he is an investor in a social media called Fireside, and if I can bring eyeballs over to that. And I said, no problem, Chris. But I'll never forget that interaction. It was a very powerful interaction because I learned about communication in a way that he didn't teach in his book, Never Split the Difference. The thing about Chris is he's extremely present. He is locked in with you and only you. When I was speaking to him, he wasn't thinking about the conference. He wasn't thinking about other people. He wasn't thinking about anything else. He was fully locked in with me. And that reminded me of I had another really powerful experience one time when I was working at LA Fitness. And it was a weekday, I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. And I don't know if you know this about the gym, but there are more people who typically go to the gym on Monday and Tuesday than they do on the weekends. It's actually really fascinating to me. I don't understand it even to this day. And the gym that I was working at was so big that in its district it was named the Mothership. And it was really busy. We had guests coming in, selling guest passes, and the thing about LA Fitness is it's cutthroat. You would never guess it as a member when you go in and you see those people behind the sales desk and they have a smile and they're laughing and joking. You think it's a chill job. That couldn't be further from the truth. It was unbelievably intense. It was so intense. It was like life or death with these sales. I remember one time there was this woman who was bringing in her son for a guest pass, and she must have told me no 12 times. And I did not back down, and she bought. And I feel guilty about that. I wish I didn't push that hard, but the only reason why I pushed that hard is just that environment, man. I learned a lot about sales in that environment. But I remember it was a very busy night, and I was still in training, and it must have been 7, 8 p.m. or something like that. You know, people were getting off of work or all that. It was something around that time. And I remember my manager said he's going to train me on the prices that they offer at LA Fitness. And he just finished with a guest, and then he was talking to another manager, and I'm sitting at my manager's desk, and people are on the intercom making announcements about guests and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, he's going to sit down and he's going to be distracted, and then we're going to get interrupted, and we're not going to go over pricing. So he sits down and he has his white paper on the desk and his pen, and he looks at me, and the world disappears. He goes, all right, let's go into pricing. And he didn't break his concentration. And he gave me the full training on pricing. It must have been a few minutes, 5-10 minutes. But he wasn't, oh, I gotta talk to this person. Hey, blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, okay, like he wasn't distracted. And I'll never forget how that made me feel. It made me feel important. It made me feel very special. It actually wowed me. And going back to the Chris Voss story, Chris Voss's presence was so powerful, just his presence alone, that it had a lasting effect on me for months. I mean, months. So I think when it comes to interacting with people and whenever I want to make a strong impression with people, one thing I always make an intention of is I give them my fullest presence. I've been doing this for years and it's opening up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities for me. There are other things at play here when it comes to communication that I do, and I'll dive into that in later videos. But presence is a massive one. When you ask someone for their name, actually be there, actually listen. Don't think about, oh, what can I get from this person? Who is this person? Or like, you're sometimes we size people up and we're thinking in terms of, is this person going to be worth my time? Or can they help me out? You'll see this a lot at networking events. Hey, what's up? What's your name? What do you do? Okay, my business does this, blah, 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 blah. Here's my business card. Are you on social media? Yeah, follow me on Instagram. It's fucking robotic, bro. It's terrible. I fucking hate networking. I fucking hate networking events. I like relationship building. I like connecting. I don't like transactional relationships. And I think presence goes so far as well because in this world, everybody's on their phone. Everybody's thinking about, the next couple things and all that kind of stuff. We live in a world with limitless distraction. So when you actually give somebody your fullest attention, your fullest being, it communicates through. And I also believe that most people feel underappreciated in their life. I don't think that most people feel heard or listened to. So when you can be that person who gives that to them, this feeling of, I see you, you're important, what you have to say is important, I'm here right with you, I'm listening to you, nothing else exists, not my phone, not my life, it's just you, my fullest attention. It communicates through and it makes a world of a difference. So next time you are meeting someone, give them your all. Give them your entire being, your entire attention. Be there fully with them in that moment. Be present, not thinking about what are you going to say next or where can we go from here. I know it's tough because if you're anything like me, I've had a lot of social anxiety in my life. And when we have social anxiety, we often want to push the conversation forward. And what we want to do is we want to minimize the silence in a conversation. But silence is very powerful. And you don't have to feel pressure to talk. If you don't have anything to say, you don't have to say anything. As a matter of fact, it can actually be powerful for you not to say anything when you don't have anything to say. Sometimes somebody seems like they finished something and you feel this pressure, now it's your turn to speak. Instead, if you don't have anything to say, don't try to, oh, okay, but and then try to come up with something. Instead, just wait. And you know what they'll do? They'll talk more. And just as I mentioned, most people aren't listened to, most people don't feel appreciated. And when you can be someone who's a listening ear and you're fully there with them, it deepens your connection with them because now they feel like they're safe to be able to express who it is that they are. You give them that playground to be heard. So be present, be patient, actually listen. Don't try to, unless you have something where you're like, oh man, I really want to ask about this, then okay, hold on to that. But sometimes in our head, we immediately grasp onto something like, okay, once there's a silence, I'm gonna talk about that for the sake of not having the silence. And what happens is you're not fully listening and now you're disconnected and now you're not present and it loses that power. So if you want to be a more powerful communicator, be more present.